Today's program features.
So thank you so much for what you're doing for our students. If you're talking about how a school district is doing in Texas, you're talking about testing. And so this chart right here represents all of the school districts that are in North Texas. And so the vertical axis is the percentage of students scoring at the proficient or college-ready level on the state standardized test. And then the horizontal axis is the percentage of students within that district that are economically disadvantaged. So it'll come as no surprise to you that these dots on the far left right here with no economically disadvantaged students are Highland Park, and with a few economically disadvantaged students and slightly higher test scores, Southlake, right? And this dot all the way over here on the right is Dallas ISD. Okay, so researchers want to understand why is it that this relationship is so pervasive. It's not just North Texas, it's nationwide. Adverse childhood experiences. So these might be things like abuse or neglect, or it might be a situation that's going on in the family, like drug abuse or untreated mental illness or something like that, that's causing these children to be challenged in terms of learning. Researchers can actually look at what's going on for these children. They're experiencing ongoing levels of toxic stress that just aren't healthy for them. And when they image their brains, they can actually see that. On the left-hand side is an image of the brain of a healthy child, and on the right-hand side was the image of a brain of a child who's experiencing severe emotional neglect. And they show, when we see the image, look for the red areas. That shows the areas of activity in the brain. What you'll see is a healthy child has a lot of activity going on in the temporal lobes and the frontal lobes. These are areas of the brain that are associated with memory, with reason, with self-control. And in the child that's experiencing neglect, those areas are very dormant. Instead, the area that's very active is the amygdala. That's the part at the base of the brain that's the site of the emotional response because of the stress that they're experiencing. All right, so when we understand this reality, it has a lot of implications for us. So we want to ask this question of what is a good school? Is a good school the Highland Park where no children are experiencing adverse childhood experiences, or is a good school a school that may have many students experiencing adverse childhood experiences that helps them beat the odds? What impact do student demographics have on school performance? Things like, how do we think about whether schools should be rated A through F? Which schools are likely to receive A's and which schools are likely to receive F's, and what does that say to that community? Another important question is, how do we evaluate teachers? And we wrestle with that on the school board, right? If you have one teacher, even though on paper the demographics might be the same, but one teacher that has a lot of students that are facing a lot of challenges and another teacher has a lot of students that aren't, how do you compare the results that they get with those students? And then finally, are charter schools the answer? If we move these same students from one school environment to another, are we going to be able to solve the problem? All right. So now that we've set the context, let me share a little bit about DISD. So we have 155,000 students that we educate every day. We employ 10,000 teachers. And we have 231 schools. 88% of our students have low socioeconomic status. So if we just take a quick look at Dallas ISD and how we're doing, what you can see is that we've almost closed the gap in terms of graduation rates with the rest of the state. So the state of Texas has 60% low socioeconomic students versus 88% at DISD. If you just compare kids that are economically disadvantaged versus other kids across the state in that same economic status, you'll find that we have closed the gap with the state. And then over the last 4 years, The district has dramatically reduced the number of schools that are rated improvement required from 43 down to 13, which is about 5% of the district. So just for your reference, every year, 5%, the lowest scoring 5% of schools across the state are designated improvement required. So for a district like Dallas ISD to be on par in terms of percentage low performing schools with the state as a whole is actually quite remarkable. So how do we help our students beat the odds? Well, it's a lot more than teaching. We provide a lot of services and support to our students. You'll see a list up here. Some of these you'll be familiar with, but we're providing meals for students. We provide breakfast in the classroom every day because many of our kids, if we don't do it, they will not have it. We're providing psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers and things like that. And some of our schools even have washers and dryers because kids are coming to school and their parents didn't even wash their clothes. So we're really trying to make the difference for these children. We have a number of strategic initiatives that have been very successful. One is our early learning program. So the school district and the board made a commitment several years ago to really making a big investment in terms of early learning and early childhood. So we've expanded the number of pre-K classrooms that we have, and we've done a lot of work to get 3- and 4-year-olds recruited, actively recruited, and going out into the community to bring those students into our classroom, because we know if they spend 1 or 2 years with us in preschool, they'll be a lot more ready for kindergarten. So a big success that we have is we've increased from 9,000 something to over 12,000 students in our pre-kindergartens. The Accelerating Campus Excellence program you may have heard about. It's a targeted approach to some underperforming schools. We put our best teachers there. It's seen dramatic success. In 1 year's time, we'll see double-digit gains in terms of test scores in both reading and math, and other school districts are now copying our model. The collegiate academies are a wonderful program that allow high school students to earn both an associate's degree and a high school diploma in 4 years. Is completely free to them and their family. We partner them with industry partners that serve as mentors to get them thinking about career. And this is, I think, going to be a real game changer for the city of Dallas. We're going to see a lot more students graduating with the skills and the head start that they need to be very successful in their careers. And then finally, thanks to a grant from the Wallace Foundation, we're able to plan and implement a social emotional learning program. And if you're not familiar with that buzzword, it's just a whole collection of strategies and innovations that we're implementing to really help students that come in with a lot of this emotional baggage and the stresses that they come to school with, to help them learn how to handle those and how to relate well with one another. And we're already seeing big results in terms of helping students reduce the number of disciplinary incidents that they're involved in, kind of get some control and get things turned around with respect to school. So our mission is educating all students for success. And when we talk about success, we're talking about life success. And so it really goes beyond just academics. So researchers have found that it's also important for a young person to feel a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose if they're going to be successful in life. So here's some things that we're doing along those fronts. We have a real commitment. It's one of our top 6 strategic goals to increase the participation in extracurricular activities, and we've seen about double in terms of our participation rate. But what that does for students, it does give them a place to plug in. It gives them a sense of belonging, gives them a reason, honestly, just to come to school, that they feel a part of that group, and there's a reason that they're there. And then, of course, our intense focus on college and career readiness. We're giving kids a purpose. What are they going to be when they grow up? Where are they headed in their life? So So those are some really positive things that are happening in the district, and overall I feel like we're moving in a great direction. We do have some challenges though. We're seeing an enrollment decline right now, and the state funds us on a per pupil basis, so anytime we lose students, we lose funding, which means fewer resources. It's really being driven by three things. One is declining birth rates in Dallas County, and so what we're seeing is this declining birth rate is making its way through our elementary schools and will continue to progress through middle school and high school. Gentrification, so come over to my area near the Bishop Arts, and if you haven't been there a while, you'll be amazed. It's really changing. It's almost unrecognizable now from what it was just a few years ago. But this is happening across the city, and what's happening is affordable housing, especially apartment buildings, are being torn down. This is where our families are living, and so they're being displaced, and beautiful new apartments and homes are going in, but they're not a place where students typically live. And then finally, charter schools have really exploded in DISD and within our boundaries. And so now we have 33,000 students going to charter schools instead of DISD. And that's making a difference for us in terms of lost revenue of $220 million. Yeah, so these are preliminary numbers the board was briefed on last week, but in general, the overall message is that if all we do is give our employees a cost of living adjustment, within a few years, our expenditures are going to exceed our revenues. The state of Texas determines how we're funded. They have a certain formula per pupil and based on certain demographics and things like that. But that formula has not changed since 2015. It can't change until the session meets in 2019, and most experts do not expect our legislature to increase that per pupil funding for the school district. So we really have to look out and think long term about the financial sustainability and viability of our school district. So the question was, how can you help? And I think what people think of most often in terms of how to help with education is to volunteer in the schools, and certainly that makes a big difference. We have so many students who are behind in their schooling, and I know they benefit from the work that you're already doing in terms of mentoring and tutoring and reading and getting involved in the schools. But I hope you'll appreciate that there's other ways to get involved, because anytime you stabilize a child's life and their environment outside of school, you're really helping them to be more successful in school. And so I know all of you are already doing things in areas that aren't necessarily school related or even education related, but just know that you're making a difference for these students. So if we think about, for example, homelessness, we have at least 3,500 homeless students. We think there are more because they tend not to disclose that information, but I cannot imagine what it would be like to try to keep up with homework or prepare for tests as a homeless child if you did not have a place to go to every single night. The other way to get involved is to really go deeper, to look at the root cause of some of these adverse childhood experiences. So for example, the problem of affordable housing or problems of violence within the city, and really dig down and get into any of those. So lots of different ways to plug in. And I think this can feel somewhat overwhelming because there's so much to fix. But I like what Steve Ballmer says about it. He is a former Microsoft executive who's now turned education champion and philanthropist, and he says, we're going to tackle this problem the way that you would eat an elephant, one bite at a time, right? And one thing I know about Rotary and this club in particular is you as members have a passion for community service. You have a commitment to making a positive impact on the community, and you're not afraid to tackle the most challenging issues of our society. So I hope that my talk today has sparked a few ideas. I hope that I've inspired some of you, and hopefully most of you, to take a bite of that elephant. Thank you.